Hello, and welcome to Data Matters Podcast, brought to you by Matatika, the simpler, smarter data platform that doesn't lock you in. In this podcast, we get into the bits and bytes of modern data, uncovering the stories from you, today's data leaders. Hosted by me, Aaron Fethian. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to today's show. We are joined by Sam Wrench from Reality Mine. Sam has a people-centric leadership style, and it's not going to be any surprise that we discuss AI and how people in the end are responsible for that output. So really looking forward to the episode. Great to have you here. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Sam, and welcome to the show. A huge pleasure to have you on. We were chatting before the show about how to introduce you, and it's fair to say it's quite an eclectic journey to hear. Science background, GB coach of Dodgeball, and leading data teams now. So please tell us a little bit about you and how you got here in data.
Yeah, I mean, as you say there, it has been feels like quite a meandering career so far. I mean, sort of starting off on the sort of science research side, for me, I was like the main goal was to be a doctor, to get a PhD. So that sort of fueled the early career. Obviously throughout that, spent a lot of time in some really interesting and complicated data sets. Got the opportunity whilst on my PhD to actually work with the GB and England dodgeball teams. So I was high up coaching capacity there, and saw them through some really exciting times with the team. Some really great performances on the global stage. Definitely a whirlwind experience for me. I was quite new to coaching and kind of took the punt, and absolutely great experience. But then coming out at the end of the PhD, I wanted to find something that sort of utilized my sort of experience with data and programming, and that led me towards working in data teams, and then naturally through sort of coaching, that leadership sort of the desire to be a leader and coach and work with people and sort of grow the people around me came through, and sort of naturally landed me in leadership positions. So that's long story short, I guess.
It definitely feels to me like we definitely want to hear about Reality Mine and the company in a moment, but the kind of coaching high performance teams in a strange way feels like an absolutely amazing preparation for leading data teams and leading teams. What's it like being that kind of high performance coach, and does it relate to your day job?
Yeah, massively. I mean, there's so much crossover. I mean, the one thing I will say, sort of with high performing sort of sports teams versus, sort of a data team, is the egos are definitely less hard to work with in the data teams. But yeah, it's the experience of, the true nature of a coach is, yes, it's to mentor, it's to help, develop the strategy and tactics and to build that team out, but actually the real side of it that no one really talks about is you're just building an environment and a culture that people can perform at their best. So once you translate that into the business world, you just start to see teams that just work well together, and just that natural sort of collaborative culture comes out. So yeah, loads and loads of crossover. It's been great to see.
Yeah. I coach a kids rugby team, and I find the whole coaching experience, really, I learn a lot about myself and learn a lot about, how people, interact and work. And I think that's cool. I mean, that's really, probably, set you up, well to lead the team. So then coming to Reality Mine, just tell us about the company and who they are first. That might be a really useful background for everyone.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been around for just over a decade now. But sort of the core business is data capture. So sort of online behavior. So capture and monitoring. Clients vary massively. A lot of it's obviously around sort of market research, competitor intelligence, and these sort of things. But the business itself and the product itself is data. So, we capture it directly off devices. I will say at this point, this is the people that are part of our data capture. They know that they're having their data captured, and it's all sort of consent based, and all that, all the good stuff that we have to make
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sure we've got in place. So yeah, that's the core product is data, and that varies massively from a very raw data feed all the way to sort of more curated data sets. So like being the data team within that business, we're quite new. And sort of we've been brought in to sort of be an internal sort of stakeholder to that data. So we're in a really great position where we're actually experiencing what our clients experience firsthand. So if we're trying to get a certain piece of insight from the data, we're hitting any of the challenges, but it then allows us just to feed straight back into the business and say, hey guys, like this is actually, a little bit difficult to work with, or I think there's like, we can add a refinement here that might make the sort of user journey seem a bit more fluid. So yeah, it's a really great place to be as a team. And the business itself is, we've got a global reach. We're working all with companies from all over the world. So yeah, it's a really, really exciting business to be with, and a really interesting proposition to be part of.
That's cool. That's cool. I'm going to stop there while I close it. Keep it recording, Akash. Don't change it. As we were, just pretend that never happened. Because sunshine wise. So, picking up from the type team and using the data. So you're using the data yourselves, and I think there is something really interesting about using your own product and the feedback loop that arises from that. Internally, then you've separated the data, engineering collection part of the business. Tell us a little bit more about you as the user of that. What are you doing with it? Like you're trying to dig into the data and what you see. What is the type of data that you're dealing with? Paint a picture of that for us.
Crikey. I mean, our remit as a data team, it is so far reaching. So, it goes all the way from, creating automated processes to try to identify whether we think we're getting all the capture that we need. So if we've got any data points that are in explicit capture, we have to build and maintain like a rule set to do that. And then through that pipeline then is all the ETL, all the sort of processing that we're doing. So we have to, part of what we're doing is building out, visibility and sort of programmatic monitoring of that side of things. So we know when things might be sort of missing downstream. And, obviously we want to make sure the data's that we're using is of the best possible quality. But then the other side of it is, really we're working, we'll work directly one-to-one with clients to understand, what it is that their use case is, or to, even if they don't have their explicit use case that they, want to share with us, which obviously is often the case, in this sort of business, everyone's, trying to get the edge. So we understand if they don't want to tell us explicitly, but we can get an idea of how we can use our data. It's where my sort of background in retail really comes in, because I can sit there and go, well, the main questions that I was asked when I was in a data team at a retailer are X, Y, Z. So we can then use that to try and pull that from our data, and we're using data from sort of app usage, so general like someone used X app and then went on to Y app. We get to see all the web sessions, and then in some certain circumstances, we get to see all the in-app data as well. So we can really go to a great depth and understand, maybe what's driving certain like product purchases, or, abandonment of basket. So we get to see all of that firsthand. It's honestly, it's a really, I love it because I'm very curious as a person. So I get to sort of sit there and, kind of be like, oh, it's really exciting because I can now see what happens when someone leaves. Like when someone abandons a basket, I can see where they go next and what their, onward journey is. So it's great.
Yeah.
It's like a kid in a playground. It's brilliant.
I'm sure that definitely helps, like, be really interested in the domain and the subject matter. We were chatting before about the demand from the client for raw data versus insight, and it's sort of become clear to me as you were describing that if they, in finance, they talk about alpha, finding the kind of opportunity. If they're not really communicating with you telling you what they want to see because that's sensitive and that's where their edge will come from. That kind of makes sense that those types of customers want the raw data and really want to figure that out for themselves. And where you're building out the insights and having that conversation and that sort of not wanting to tell you, that could be quite strange actually, and being able to dig into yourself and make your own assumptions. It feels quite similar to a data team inside a company where they're trying to deliver insights to the business, but perhaps don't have or can't get, certainly without conversation, what the business is about. How do you go about digging into it? What's your kind of like mental model of working on an insight?
I will say that will vary massively. I think I mean, the starting point, if I can get something, I want to have face-to-face time with people. I'm very much a people person. I want to be in the room and having that conversation. Probably comes from the sort of the time as a coach. The hands-on time is where you make the biggest impact. So, um, yeah, it's getting that hands-on time. If we can't do that, it's really starting to. You kind of have to cast the net quite wide. You have to think about what the general sort of themes are within the industry. So for me, staying close, not just to the data industry, but the broader, like, going to like marketing meetups and staying close to those sort of more like sort of diverse teams outside of my business, it's paramount because I get to sort of see the pain points that they're hitting normally. And then we can bring that internally and go, okay, so if our data dropped within that person's team, would they be able to use it to answer those questions? And that's when I sort of then use my team to explore some of these options. So yeah, it really has to be a sort of best guess and just really staying close to the industry, which is, why I'm probably so active in sort of the networking communities. I need to kind of get that insight into what questions people are asking. And I think it'd be impossible to finish this podcast without using the word AI. And that's one of the biggest disruptors at the moment across the industry. Everyone knows it. And, we're looking at, okay, well, what impact can we see in our data from, these emerging AI apps? So, that's kind of how we have to go about it is a lot of detective work and a lot of sort of just general curiosity and
Yeah,
exploration,
yeah.
really.
And
So,
that
yeah.
that I definitely see that as a way for someone to be a high performer in a data team is really grow the knowledge of the business and be curious about it. On AI, we were talking about sort of the different ways AI has been used, pre-show, and there's coding agent type style AI. There is another kind of AI that I think you touched on there that you're doing as a person, the more exploratory, what is in the data that's not immediately obvious. And I think one of the things that you were sort of sharing with me is that it doesn't really work without a person. I think you gave it a name, a kind of an assistant. Tell us a little bit more about what you think the kind of opportunity with AI on data and data sets is.
Yeah, so I mean, I do think there's really two sides to AI, and it's probably a conversation that I've had many sort of we'll call them conflicts in sort of general conversations, either at meetups or whatever. One side that I think is incredibly powerful about AI is we're now able to sort of embed them quite easily on our sort of like internal systems or across our databases or even just like a knowledge base. So I'm finding it's a lot easier to be able to onboard people onto our data sets because they can sort of have a conversation with information in a language that they understand. So, that's one side of it that I'm really, really, I mean, as a business, we're massively leaning into, using AI to sort of, obviously increase, our efficiency and output. Some of these, I mentioned it before about, I sort of like explicit capture within apps. That is something that, an AI can do really, really well is figure out what it is that we want to capture and start to pull that out and start to create these, rules for explicit capture. So that's one area that we're really sort of leaning into. And I suppose that sort of then leads into the other side of it and how we're kind of utilizing AI as a team ourselves is to use these models and sort of send them out across our quite sort of diverse data set and quite complicated data set to start to point out, either trends that we might not see normally or correlations, and start to kind of interrogate that data on its own accord. And I think this the side of it that we talked about previously that I've seen emerging quite a lot in conversations, and I think is a really great way of looking at it, is the sort of like the ownership model around AI. It's so easy to get AI to write you an email or whatever, and you send it off to a client, and there it goes. You never read it. It's just bang bang gone. The sort of growing narrative is, actually, if you're using AI, that's still your work. So I've seen a lot of people have like digital colleagues, and they're the kind of line manager to that digital colleague, and any mistake that makes falls back to you. So that ownership and
Yeah.
accountability, you're like, well, maybe I'm going to check that work before it goes across the line. So I love that side of it, and it sort of goes back to me I love human in the loop, and I love people being in that space.
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of changes up the narrative a bit to fully automated to it's like an intern almost that's going a bit
Oh,
wild. You
yeah.
want to
Yeah.
sort of like ring them in and check their work a little bit. So yeah.
We see that progression as well. And actually, it reminds me of, I think it was the police recently had reported a football game that had never happened. And it was because they were, used Google or something that gave an AI response. And it was fairly inconsequential in reality, in that it was, a match. Yeah, the issue I think was around, quite a sensitive topic, but the actual like what AI had produced was quite inconsequential, but it was still their work. And obviously, the news item was the police uses AI, and that's quite scary for people to think about. If I think about my kids and what they're doing, they're like, they are using AI, but they're already growing, very skeptical of the result because they get burnt quite early on. I feel like that's the maturity everyone's going through quite quickly, is that like AI is great, but it can be completely wrong, and that's still you. I find that what you're talking about there is very insightful. How do you deal with that?
I think I mean my biggest approach is really to sort of like try to drive home that accountability side of it. And like I think you're saying about your kids there, it's a really good example because if you imagine, so me in the workplace, if I was just like, okay, well, I wasn't brought up on AI, but I've got it available to me now. So, hey, ChatGPT, let's write me this email and send it. Then maybe that goes to the exec and they look at me and go, what is this load of rubbish? And, you can see that it's been written by AI. So they just kind of, will either roll their eyes or they'll call you out on it. If a child is going through schooling is sending, AI assignments in and they've got all the sort of hallucinations in there, the teachers are going to be fairly, stern on that one. And I think like what we'll see is, that those kids will grow up to be probably using AI in a much more sophisticated way and a more like correctly skeptical way. So that's what I'm trying to sort of bring into it is, if people aren't wanting to use Copilot agent like in agent mode, it's like, okay, well, use it in ask mode. Look at this new this code base you've never used before, and ask it, what does it do? Or ask it, you've just written a code base, you've just written some changes. Ask it what you've done, and see if it can tell you what you should have done and what you've actually done. So it's kind of, I find it's a bit of a tailored approach. Some people are diving in, all in with AI, and that's great. They need sort of to be kind of led through the sort of, I guess, the governance and the sort of maybe just understand the risks. Whereas those that are really skeptical of it, it's like, okay, well, let's look at those small wins that we can start to like bring into the business and, you know, changing your workflow. And it's kind of, I mean, I was going to say, it sounds like I'm going back into the coaching thing now, is it's each person has its own like way of working, and you have to make sure that you're meeting them on that level and bringing them
Yeah.
on the journey.
And I think everyone's on that. There is no really well proven way to use it yet because nobody's got the experience. There are some more experienced people and sharing their ways of working, but And that's kind of the most exciting thing. It's like everyone's playing an entirely new game, and to a degree, the data team's in a position of coaching everyone on how to play this entirely new game. And it's like, well, actually, you're sort of only just seeing the rules and constraints for the first time yourselves. So, yeah, that's equally scary and challenging, I'm sure, and exciting for teams that are trying to deal with that. If you look at then coming back to Reality Mine and the kind of what you guys are doing and working on, give us an idea of how that tool set works and perhaps what the tools are, as far as you can. Like share with us what is your experience so far of the tools and what's good and what's working for you.
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk too much about like obviously the capturing, obviously the processing of data, because obviously that's our secret sauce.
Yeah, no, same
But
area.
yeah, I can also talk about like what we're doing with the data and like what tooling we're going about it. We're in an interesting place really. So the sort of controversial thing I'm going to say is we're using QuickSight, AWS Quick Suite, to do our sort of BI and dashboards. Um, which I was talking to a recruiter maybe a week or two ago, and they were like, "Do these new people have to use QuickSight?" And I was like, "Ideally." It's like, "Yeah, I think there's 12 in the Northwest." And I was like, "Right, brilliant." So a very niche sort of version of the sort of the BI tooling. But the reason we're having to do that is with our data being so vast, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I'm sure people wouldn't want getting out there and that sort of stuff. Information security for us is absolutely paramount. So we have it sort of written in to contracts that we won't move sort of panelist level data outside of the ecosystem that we capture it in, which is AWS. So we're sort of bound to using the sort of AWS tooling. There are obviously nuances within that tooling, and there's things that we have to work around, and there's there's challenges. But I go back to our sort of stakeholders quite a lot, because in the tech team we know that there's this restriction on what we can and can't do. But the more removed sort of stakeholders in our business are saying, well, yeah, why can't we use this platform? Why can't we use this platform? And it's less so to, I don't want to just say, I go, oh, well, we can't because it's contractual. It's helping them understand that we can do what we need to do on, this BI tool or another BI tool. They all work slightly differently. Some of them are a bit more, drag and drop, and, there it is. Some of them take a bit more like heavy lifting. And I think that the thing that we've had to really drive home to people is the BI tooling sits on top of the data, which everyone roughly understands. But the data in which it sits on that's where the work has to be. We've spent, my team's only been in place for about 12 months now, and our journey to date has been building consumable data sets. It's been building like good quality, well aggregated, well understood data sets that have a good level of understanding around them. So we can use that to then stick a dashboard on top of it and go, there it is. And that is starting to sink through into people's like sort of when they're having a conversation about building a dashboard, they're going, okay, so we'll know we use this. What do we need to do underneath that to get that system to do what we need it to do? So
Mhm.
yeah, it's a niche. I mean, it's a niche skill set. I will say we've been incredibly lucky in the fact that we hired someone within the first 4 hires of the team who's been basically using QuickSight since it came out, worked in one of the Amazon like
Health.
logistics centers. Yeah, it was been an absolute godsend, because they knew the tooling inside out, and they've been able to work with the existing Viz developers and grow that out. That's been a godsend. And I think like that's where I'd sit to is, if you are in a niche technology, it's not necessarily rip all the technology out and go for something new because it's easier. It's if you can find someone that can really utilize that niche technology, if it's embedded in the business already and there's reasons why we have to use it, just get the right person working with that technology, and then bring that technology to life in a more functional way, rather than, oh, we're going to get rid of it all and go, cloud first, completely disrupt the business and change everything and all these sort of
without
fun
actually a
stuff.
different outcome. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
It sounds like you have a quite a unique challenge there with your users in that if they have good tech knowledge and they're actually suggesting to you the tools that they would like to use, maybe that's a little bit different to a lot of teams where they have their complaints about the report or the insight or how it maybe even how it looks or what the information you're sharing them, but I'm not sure they all have a strong opinion on what tool would be better. Why do they have what are they your users, why do they have this strong opinion about the tools that they would prefer to use?
You see, I think like maybe in this situation, because obviously it's BI tooling, it seems a bit of a stronger narrative. But I think it's, from my experience, it's actually fairly common that we'll get someone coming up to us and say, "Oh, we need this model." Why do you need this model? Oh, because we had it at the last place I worked at. It's like, okay, were they doing the same thing as what we're doing now? Not fully, but like it was really good. And it's like, okay, so
They
I,
understood
I,
it, so clearly they
it,
felt comfortable in that space.
yeah, yeah. And like that's the sort of, I think, the side of it that we miss out on is, it's very easy as a tech team or data team to sort of slip into that sort of slip into the lane of like the business says and you will do. Like, the business says we're moving to this technology. Okay, cool. Right, we'll move to that technology. We'll do all the, like, the necessary migrations. But we don't go back and be like, why are we proposing this move? Why are we having this big disruptive transformation when actually what we have is fit for purpose? We're just maybe not utilizing it well enough, or find the specific challenge that that person's facing. Like we as a business um, don't do oodles of analysis at the moment on our like onboarding journey for people to like download our app so that they can start the data capture. We don't do loads of that. And we're like, okay, well actually we need to. And that's not come as a sort of thing that we're like, all of a sudden one day we're like, we should care about our like onboarding funnel. It was a new business stakeholder came in and they were like, can we have this tooling? Because this is really, really good for checking the funnel metrics of like an onboarding or a recruitment funnel. And we were like, okay, cool. The problem isn't the tool. The problem is the fact that we actually don't currently, you know, capture or process or prioritize that data. So it's it's now having that conversation of like, we can probably do this in our own ecosystem as it lies today. We just need to catch a few additional data points, process a few
Yeah, yeah.
more,
Use
and
what
then
we've
start
got.
to bring that together. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that is like such great advice in loads of different domains and circumstances. Like the thing that occurs to me is like quite often in development you spend quite a lot of effort creating something, developing something, but if nobody knows about it, then what's the point in all that energy and that effort? It's the same with that data set that's tucked away in a corner that's really compelling, does something really quite insightful, but if nobody knows about it or understands what's in it. And so I feel like the kind of takeaway advice is people should spend more time telling people about the data they have, and then that education like gives them the next ability to ask the right questions and sort of really do more with the data. That's cool. That's quite interesting. I suppose then, like if you look at your users, some of them are in fact customers, and you're trying to understand that data. They tend to be quite data literate, I suppose. Or they tend to be already like know their way.
So this, I mean, this is it's a real, you'd assume so, because traditionally we've been sort of a almost a raw feed kind of business where we do an amount of, pre-processing. We make sure the data is clean and usable, but there's definitely been a sort of, we've known that it's landed in a business into sort of an engineering team. They're going to do the processing that they need. And often a lot of our previous clients were sort of the middlemen in the situation where we'd give them the raw or raw-ish data. They would then sort of do what they need to do with it and, sort of do the enrichment necessary. And then they'd sort of sell it on to another vendor, or to an end client. We're now moving in, we work a lot more now directly with those end clients. And the one thing that's sort of coming through that transition of moving to working directly with the end client is some people will step in the door and be like, we have a massive data engineering team that is bigger than your entire business, and we will take everything you can give us, and we'll get the insight from it. And you go, okay, cool, that's fine. And they they're doing sort of, you know, they effectively want to have the IP themselves. They want to develop the models themselves. They
Yeah.
want to have everything on their side. So of course we're like, well, do all the commercials and blah blah blah. Um, and that's actually realistically, quite an achievable thing for us, because it is our bread and butter of moving data from someone's device, someone's behavior into someone's, data lake, and off they go. But not all of our clients are massive data engineering teams. Some of them are, maybe more in the sort of either the strategy part of the business or even the marketing part
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
business, or
And they need
wherever they might
more
sit.
refined, don't they? Yeah, so it's like they definitely need someone who's explained it and always not dumbed it down, but already come to some sort of conclusions to get the value out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And in that situation, it's, maybe you've got a small data science team that sits in a sort of like a remote part of the business, or maybe you've got like a few analysts. But like in that situation, we need to be a lot more mindful. And like, this is really where my team pays its dues within our businesses. We need to be a lot more mindful of like, how usable is that data from the day in which it leaves our ecosystem into theirs. And
Yeah.
we have to do that sort of due diligence to know what's their data team look like, or what does the
What's
people
their
that are
level of
using this data
competency? Yeah.
primarily. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's quite relevant to any data team that some users may actually be asking for raw data and they leave it to me. And I think perhaps the risk of that I hear fairly often is that they might draw conclusions that aren't accurate. You know, you almost give them too much power to make the mistakes and conclude things. And also in kind of legacy environments, I see a lot of that where there's actually a fairly well established data set that's helping people make a decision that's wrong. Maybe it was right at one point, but it's no longer right. And that kind of process is quite hard for teams to go to and have to get back to what do we want this data set to answer. I wonder if you have any advice for how to deal with that. Like how do you go about explaining what they should and shouldn't be doing with a data set?
Uh, well, I mean, what you've explained there, the way I sort of always explain it to my team is it becomes the sort of classic dual responsibility model. Like, although we might be delivering a raw feed, we need to make sure that we can monitor that raw feed best we can. So are we getting, the right explicit capture and these sort of things? So it's even though we're passing most of the sort of the processing work onto the other side, we need to make sure that what we're delivering is still the same. And I think it's that mindset sometimes can be like, oh well, if it's going over there, they'll be doing all of their sort of due diligence, and they'll be doing all the checks to it. Exactly. So it sort of becomes you sort of lose that, the client might sit there and go, okay, so we've had all the checks on this, and then the sort of delivery is just raw, so they kind of loses that communication. So it's the way, well, the best way we sort of combat it is to try and get in as early in as possible, ideally in the sort of pre-sales process, to get a real clear idea of what it is, what data it is that they want, and if they can't give us a question that they want to answer, or a use case, it's to try and explore what key data points within this journey they really need to see. Once we can start establishing that, it's then you know, we can sort of build up our side of things to make sure that what we're delivering is correct. Sort of onboarding it into a business for us, it can be very varied. It can be, we spend a lot of time working with them directly, or they might be like, what, we want to spend just time figuring it out, and we'll come back and ask you a few questions here and there. Or, we'll say we've seen sort of this trend. Is this, a technical trend that, something on your side, or is it, something within the sort of wider world? So, we'll sit there and say, oh no, there's a political event has driven this increase in this app, and these sort of things.
It strikes me that that is really quite difficult and requires quite a lot of understanding of what could go wrong. And I can now see why you might be trying to get the opportunity of pointing AI at that and helping make that conclusions. But how on earth do you deal with the investigation into whether AI has got it right any more than you deal with those conversations of the conclusions they might draw? That feels incredibly challenging. And maybe there isn't an answer yet.
No, I think that's it. It's at the moment, the the key thing at the moment for me is making sure that when we're passing over, even if it's a bit of analytics to say that we've checked this data and it looks good, it's understanding that the person still has to be part of that process. On our side, they need to be. I'm putting the rubber stamp on this. I'm making sure that this is right. And if it comes back and what I've said is incorrect, they need to be that sort of responsibility model.
I get it. Yeah.
With AI, there was a quote a while ago that sort of stuck with me, which was I've got a feeling it was someone with an open AI said that, if you're developing a sort of something within AI today, but the particular thing that you want doesn't exist, just develop the work stream regardless. And by the time you've delivered it in 6 months, it will exist. So I was like, okay, that's confident. But it's true, like technology is moving at such a pace now, that we, you know, we have to be careful with how we're using it. And, with Reality Mind, we're very ambitious with using AI, but we're also incredibly mindful of the risks of AI. And I think that's where a lot of businesses might come undone, is they're like, let's go AI first. And they don't really onboard the business into this is what can go wrong when AI doesn't work. Like this is the risk. So I think at the moment, the only answer at the moment to make sure that the AI isn't going wild and doing stuff that we're not expecting is to kind of keep that person in the room with the AI and just make sure it's doing what it needs to do. And if it's the AI tells us that it's spotted a trend, and then I pass that on to a human analyst and say, can you just verify this trend? Like we can do that. And I'd rather do that than us just pipe it over to clients and say, oh, this has gone wrong. And then they go, right, okay,
Yeah. Let's
that's
have
a
your opinion.
big deal, and it's actually just a hallucination. So that's the only answer I've got at the moment, is just keep the people close to it, and give them that accountability that if this goes across the line, it is still your work, even though you've used an AI.
That's that I think perhaps is a really great point to wrap up on, and really sound advice that you might have this super tool, but you still should be accountable and you should still be owning the output. I think that's really great. Perhaps give you the last word, and anything that you would give as advice to how to go about that accountability, or how to get people to still maintain the ownership of their work, or is it simply just to make sure that they are?
I think, and it's really boils down to, for me, it's how you build your team. I
Mm,
know it's probably something that we touched upon at the start, and haven't gone back to really, but it's how you put the team together will help you. Because at the moment, I could be one voice in the team saying you need to use AI, but you need to check that AI, and people are like, well, why don't
it
I just
needs
do
to
it
be
myself?
accepted by everyone.
Exactly. So if we get the team right and get everyone supporting each other and working together on it, and I've had people within my team turn around and being like, this document reads a bit AI. Brilliant. Thank you for feeding that back to me. And that's exactly what I've focused on, is building that team that works as a unit and make sure that we're all jointly accountable for what goes out the door. And building that into the team is what's made that a lot more achievable for us.
Yeah. That feels like a really interesting next chapter of everyone, what do we accept, and what do we accept is AI okay, and what do we accept is not, and representing us the way we want to be. Well, thanks, Sam. I really think that has been quite a cool insight into how your world looks in the world of data and the other emerging technologies, and how you deal with people, and all that brings. So yeah, thanks again for coming on the show.
It's been great. It's been good talking to you. It's been a really interesting conversation. So hopefully we'll have another one soon.
Yep, will do. Thanks, Sam. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Brought to you by Matatika, the simpler, smarter data platform. Data Matters aims to share the latest technology directions and your experiences in modern data. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not hit the follow button and stay up to date with new episodes as they're released. Finally, if you feel the episode could benefit someone you know, please share it with them. And we're always on the lookout for guests with interesting experiences to share. This has been Data Matters. I've been Aaron Fethian, your host. And until next time, bye for now.